This is lesson number 3 in the series of lessons called Music Theory for Banjo Players. Key signatures. It's interesting. Most banjo players use tablature. Pretty rare that banjo players use the standard music notation, although some do. But most of us use tab, and in the tab, you don't see a key signature. There's no need for it, because the tablature tells you what string to fret and what fret to fret it at. But in standard music notation, there's always a key signature. And every song, we're talking about Western music now, not specifically country Western, but Western music like European and American music as opposed to Asian music. Most Western music is in a key. For the banjo, it's pretty typical that we play in the key of G because we use an open G tuning on the banjo. So it gives us some nice open strings and things like that to work with. But songs are in a key, whether you see a key signature or not. And what does that mean, really? I mean, why do we have different keys? The banjo can play in any key, not just G, and you can play in any key, frankly, without retuning the banjo, although we do retune the banjo some for different keys. Well, it's an interesting thing about songs that when they're in a given key, that almost all of the notes for the melody and for the chords come right out of that scale. Not always, and you can have notes outside of the key signature. And when we do have those notes, because a lot of times we'll have like a chromatic walk or something, and you're bound to have notes outside of the key if you walk one fret at a time or half step at a time. But we can have notes outside of the key. But when we do in standard notation, we have to indicate that somehow. So we'll put a little sharp sign or a natural or a flat sign in front of the note. And that's called an accidental. Not that they're accidents. They aren't. That's what we call it when we have a note outside the key signature. Anyhow, we'll have a look at some accidentals here in just a little bit. In lesson number 1, we talked about the major scale. And in fact, I gave you a diagram there summarizing all the major scales in both sharp keys and flat keys. And today we're talking pretty much major keys. When we get to lesson number 10, we'll talk a little bit more about minor keys and modes and stuff like that. But major keys and key signatures for today. Now in lesson number 1, we were talking about major scales, and we mentioned that the C major scale is really the only major scale that falls into that pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, naturally without having to alter the notes. Any other key of G, like for the banjo, has 1 sharp, which is F sharp, so we have to modify that note a little bit to make it fit that pattern. Key of E has 4 sharps, and so forth. So where do these come from? Well, look at the C major scale. I'll put it up on the screen here. It's simply C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And does it fit the pattern? Well, yeah. C to D is whole step, D to E is a whole step, E to F is a half step, naturally. F to G is a whole step, G to A is a whole step, A to B is a whole step, and then B to C is a half step. So we don't have to modify any of those notes. So if we have a song in the key of C, you'll look for a key signature, but you won't see anything. Actually, there is a key signature, right? It's no sharps or flats. But for any other major key, you'll have either some sharps or some flats. Back in lesson number 1, we played the D major scale, just walking up a string. Either the 4th string or the 1st string will do. Let's just walk up this 1st string, keeping that pattern, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So we go open to 2nd fret, to 4th fret, now half step to the 5th fret, whole step to the 7th fret, whole step to the 9th fret, whole step to the 11th fret, and half step to the 12th fret. So we played the D major scale. But if I put up the letters D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, would that be the D major scale? Well, no, right? Because we've already kind of determined that the C major scale is the only one where you don't have to add any sharps or flats. So let's see what we have to do to those letters to make it fit that pattern. D, go a whole step or to the second fret, that's E, but now the next step is a whole step, not a half step. So really that puts us at the fourth fret, which is F sharp. Now a half step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, now a whole step to C sharp, and then a half step to D. So for the key of D, or the D major scale, we have two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. We could figure this out for every single key of the 12 major keys, but there's a quick way. If you play in these keys, different keys a lot, you'll automatically know. Key of E, 4 sharps. Key of D, 2 sharps, and so forth. But there's a simple way to remember both the sharp keys and the flat keys. And for the sharp keys, think fat cats go down and eat breakfast. This is the order of sharps. Fat cats go down and eat breakfast. In other words, if there's one sharp in a key signature, it will be F sharp. If there are 2 sharps, it'll be C sharp. 3 sharps, fat cats go, it'll be G sharp, in that order. And the last sharp in the key signature is a half a step below the note that names the key. Now that may seem a little bit complicated. Let me say that again. The last sharp in the key signature is a half step below the note that names the key. For instance, we talked about the key of D already. Well, what's a half a step below D? C sharp. So we count fat cats. Oh, there's the C already, 2 sharps in the key of D. So if you were told 3 sharps, so you can go both ways, okay? 3 sharps. Well, what keys 3 sharps represent? Fat cats go. Well, so G sharp is the last sharp. That's a half a step below the note that names the key. G sharp, half a step above that is A. Key of A has 3 sharps. That's an easy way to figure out either what the key is, knowing how many sharps there are, or knowing the key, how many sharps are there. And you know what they are because of the order of sharps. Same thing applies to flat keys. For thinking about flat keys, I think bead, B-E-A-D, like the word like a beaded necklace, bead, go C flats. And you'll notice that the order of flats is exactly the opposite as the order of sharps. And the trick there is the second to last flat names the key. It's not above or below or anything like that. The second to last flat names the key. So you remember key of F has 1 flat. That's the B. And then for any other flat key, the second to last flat names the key. So for instance, pick a key like A flat. All right? How many flats are there in the key of A flat? Well, B, E, A, D. Well, the A flat is the second to last flat, so there are 4 flats there. If you're told there are 2 flats in this key, what key is it? 2 flats are B and E. The second to last flat is the first flat, which is B. So it's the key of B flat. Now let's talk a little bit about accidentals and what they mean. Figure 3.4 is just 2 bars of music. You can see there's 1 sharp there, so that means it's in the key of G. Again, it's a F sharp being a half step below G. So key of G with 1 sharp. In the first measure, got a couple of accidentals there. The second quarter note is a C sharp. So that means instead of playing C, you're going to play C sharp, but only for that measure. Once you cross the bar line, then all bets are off. Those accidentals go away. If you want a C sharp in the next measure too, you're going to have to put another accidental there. So in the first measure, that second quarter note is a C sharp. The third quarter note is an F natural. So in the key signature, F is sharp, but we actually want to play an F natural, not an F sharp, so we put the little natural sign in front of it. Then when we get to the second measure, the first note is an F sharp, because we're back to the key signature. And the last two notes are C notes, C natural, not C sharps, because that only applied in the previous measure. So we can have accidentals in the melody or even in the chords. You know about chords in a key being major, minor, or diminished. Well, many times, like in ragtime tunes, we want even the 2 and the 6 to be major chords, not minor chords. So we can have that. That's not a problem. But you will see accidentals in the sheet music when you come across those. So that's a quick summary of key signatures, why we have them, what they look like, how to determine what the key is from the key signature. Now, as we're talking about key signatures, let me mention something else that's kind of interesting. Before we had electronic tuners like this, we used to use one of these guys. And this is, you may be thinking this guy really is old, which is true. This is a tuning fork. This is an A440 tuning fork. What we would do, wrap it on your knee and then touch the bridge, and you hear this lovely tone. That's A440. That is first string, 7th fret. And why do I bring that up? Well, we're talking about transposing instruments. And, believe it or not, the banjo is a transposing instrument. But we're lucky. It transposes down a whole octave. In other words, when we see a note written on the staff, we don't really play that note. We play a note that's an octave lower. And that's why I bring up the A440 tuning fork. A440, by definition, is the A above middle C. So on the staff, you'll see that's the second space. Middle C is the note on that little ledger line below the staff. Actually, if we were using both treble and bass clefs, there'd be one little ledger line between the two. We don't use the bass clef, just the treble. So it's the little ledger line below the treble clef. That's middle C. So you start going up from there, C, D, E, F, G, A. The A above middle C is the second space. But when we see that A above middle C, we play this note. Second fret of third string. That's an octave lower than 7th fret of first string. So we actually play an octave lower, transposing instrument. Luckily, we're transposed down an entire octave. Some other instruments are transposed like other intervals, partial octaves and so forth. So it's kind of easy for the banjo. Why do we do that? To get as many notes as possible on the staff, so we don't have to read off of ledger lines like way up above the staff or way down below the staff. So both the guitar and banjo are transposing instruments. So that's a little introduction to key signatures and transposing instruments.